Today I'm going to be refuting Christopher's claim that Mitt Romney will be elected president in the 2012 election. My opponent's secondary claims were that Romney will win the Republican nomination based on current poll standings, that Romney is perceived by others as capable of doing the job, and that Romney is ahead in a hypothetical election poll, and also because of Obama's staggering approval ratings. My response to his secondary claims are that they do not provide sufficient enough grounds to merit the certainty of his proposition. To address his first claim that Romney will win the Republican nomination because of current poll standings, he says that 0.5% to even 3% of a lead over his competitor Herman Cain shows that he's has some contention, but 0.5% and even 3% at the largest is not a substantial enough lead to attribute to his claim. The polls that he selected are in Romney's favor, but there are polls conducted quite frequently, and all of them do not hold Romney as the front runner. Everyone who is current on these standings knows that whenever Cain is in front and whenever Romney is in front, the one behind them is always in striking distance. So, in fact, a poll that I found on pollingreport.com, which was conducted a few days ago, holds Herman Cain ahead with 24% of the vote, while Romney is behind 4%. These candidates go head-to-head every single week, and neither has a marginal enough lead to put the claim out there that they will undoubtedly win the Republican primary. On to my opponent's second claim. He says that Romney will win the presidency because others perceive him as capable of doing the job. I'd like to call attention to the fact that he cited an article about the probable jobs that Romney will create from Fox News. Fox News is a network that is known to have a right-wing bias. The majority of the commentators, writers, and supporters of Fox News are conservative in their ideals. So I think that those grounds should be challenged because of the reliability. Secondly, my opponent drew on Romney's academic merit as well as several accomplishments and accolades as grounds for his claim. He mentions that Romney graduated cum laude from law school, and that he speaks and debates well. My response is that academic merit and accolades are not sufficient grounds to guarantee that someone will be elected. There are plenty of candidates whose academic careers are very admirable, but that does not guarantee them election. We can look at someone like Al Gore, for instance, who was in the running for the 2000 presidential election. Al Gore graduated cum laude from Harvard in 1969. He was a dynamic public speaker. He had the support of several grassroots organizations and even won the popular vote in the 2000 election by more than 500,000 votes. And all of that did not help him secure the presidential election. Al Gore was well esteemed and favorable by many, and even had tons of political experience. He served in the House of Representatives and even the Senate for more than 20 years, but none of that secured him the presidency. My opponent's last claim is that Mitt Romney will be elected president in 2012 because of the way he faces up with current President Barack Obama. While it is true that Obama's approval ratings are staggering, my opponent's claim that a 3% lead in a hypothetical poll doesn't provide substantial evidence for his claim. According to a United Technologies National Journal Congressional Connection poll conducted by the Princeton Survey Research Associates that was conducted between October 27th and the 31st, which is a few days ago, 43% of voters want to see Obama reelected, while 44% want to see a Republican elected. A 1% difference can change tomorrow. The same way the aforementioned statistic isn't enough grounds to warrant Romney's assumption, neither is my opponent's. In addition, my opponent also points to the ideas that voters are finding comfort in Romney's economic plans, and that the current president does not have a great understanding of our economy. One major issue not being confronted by my opponent is that Romney's biggest hindrance to securing the presidency is his stance on health care reform. If Obama's understanding of our economy pales in comparison to Romney's, why is it that Obamacare is strikingly similar to Romney Care, which is enacted in Massachusetts? It is so similar that both Romney and Obama critics refer to it as Obamacare. Both seek to reduce the number of uninsured by expanding Medicaid and giving tax breaks to help lower income people afford insurance. And both systems also are require people by law to pay for insurance or pay a penalty. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, even after Romney's system was enacted, Massachusetts is among the 10 most expensive states for average monthly premiums in the individual market. Their premiums are around $400 a month, while the national average is approximately $200 a month. So, in closing, my opponents claim that Mitt Romney will be elected as president in the 2012 election is not properly supported because his grounds are insufficient. Thank you.
All right, all the organizational stuff is solid. You argue that basically the advocate's claim is insufficient to advance this point, and you give us good reasons to believe there's room for doubt. The percentage differences, for instance, on the poll standing in the Republican race, I think, is pretty good, 0.5% to 3%. One of the things you might want to point out, for example, is that most of the polls have built in a range of error of 3 to 5%. So this is all well within the standard deviation on the results. So nothing seems to be definitive here. And I thought that you had a good response by pointing out that Kane is currently leading in one of the most recent polls. So I think you have a pretty good summary on that argument, and you should also point out that that's the only argument that the advocate presented in favor of Romney getting the nomination are the poll standings in some of these particular states. I do think that there are other structural issues that tend to favor Romney, but they didn't come up as an argument from the advocate, so it's not necessarily for you to refute them here. Transition, the second point was really clear. I don't know about the Fox News bias issue. I think that gets you only so far. I do think that you've got a better argument on the question of merit, and you've got a nice analogy that you draw here, although I don't think anybody would accuse Al Gore of being a dynamic public speaker. I think that's perhaps a little hyperbole there. But the argument that he's got, cum laude, and he's got vast government experience, and, he actually had won the popular vote, but that didn't secure him the election. I think those are all very good points to show that that you can't make an inference based on this kind of data. And here's an example about, well, otherwise we would have thought that, that would have happened. So I thought that that's a reasonable challenge there, and it's a good counterexample to the argument that the advocate presents. And then the hypothetical matchup. We're back to the poll numbers again. It's basically the same issue here that we have on the first point. There are questions about the polls. There's not a lot of discussion about the strengths and weaknesses of Obama as a candidate for re-election. There is a little bit of a discussion about Romney's weakness on the health care issue and how that's connected to the economic issue is not quite as strong as it could be. Look, if both of them suck on the same issue, then it's going to be decided on something else, I guess, and then we're going to have to look at whatever those differences are. Did the advocate give us any good issues to look at? Your argument should be, no, the only argument he's got is the economic one, and you're the only one who's providing some explanation about what that economic argument is. I'm not sure that's the strongest point on this particular point, but if the advocate didn't provide it, and you are providing it, then there's a standard by which we can measure, and that's the way you present it. All right, thank you.